One of the responsibilities of leading an organization is charting its future direction. But sometimes that direction isn't always clear. Making it clear is the essence of what we call strategic thinking. Hello, I'm Rudy Champa, Managing Director of Strategy Partners International. Over the next few minutes, we'll be talking to 3 successful CEOs, and you'll hear their direct experience in using our unique process of strategic thinking. I think you'll agree with me that this is not your usual approach to strategy. I had the good fortune of talking to 3 CEOs about their experience using our strategic thinking process. I'll begin with Phil Kantz. Phil was the CEO of Tab Products. The board of Tab had brought Phil in to lead them out of a stagnant revenue situation.
Its main business was in office products and office furniture and office supplies.
How was Tab doing when you showed up?
Tab was profitable. It had, good news is it had about $150 million worth of revenue. But the bad news was it had done $150 million of business for 3 years in a row. And that's a telltale sign that there are other dynamics going on, and of course the profitability was drying up.
What need were you trying to fill by using our strategic thinking process?
One of the needs that I had was, how do I bring this management team together and really build a team out of them? And one of the ways to do that is to address the second need, which is, what is our strategy really, and what do we want it to be?
Next, we meet Rak Kumar, the CEO of Rasta Graphics, a company at the other end of the spectrum from Tab Products. Rasta Graphics was formed a little over a decade ago, but has grown rapidly since.
Rasta Graphics is a 15-year-old Silicon Valley company. Its primary business is to develop very large printers and software and so on for billboard or printing graphics that go on the side of a bus. Very early in the game, we were about 20 people, a few $1 million in revenue, very much a Silicon Valley startup, and that was back in 1991. And since then, we've grown from about 20 people to 500 people and more than $100 million in business. But at the same time, as we looked around, we saw that our competitors were big companies like Xerox. And when you have limited resources, you want to make sure that you have a strategy that will allow you to continue to grow and not get trampled by a big player like a Xerox. So we were looking for some simple concepts that could keep us focused and could help us articulate to the whole management team on how we were going to take on these big players in the industry.
My last guest is Tom Erdman. Tom's the Vice President and General Manager of a division of the Harris Corporation called Network Support Systems Division. Harris is a Fortune 500 company. Harris makes test equipment for telephone line service providers.
Just before I called you in, I was made the Vice President and General Manager for this division. And I had taken over a division that was extremely dysfunctional, in my opinion. We were divided into 3 business units with going in 3 unique directions. There was competition for resources amongst the 3 businesses. And I really believe that you can have a wonderful plan, but if you don't have the team behind the plan, nothing's going to happen. So I needed to build team, build consensus, build synergy, and then have the plan to follow.
While each of these CEOs may have had different products, different technologies, different markets, different customers, different management styles, they all shared one common need. That was for one strategy that everyone from the head of the company down to people on the line could get behind 100%.
In my opinion, the biggest problem with strategy development has always been that people develop a strategy, it's written up in gold letters, goes in a nice binder, and then it sits on a shelf somewhere. And I've seen in so many organizations, you ask them what the strategy is, and people will read the statement that doesn't mean anything because it has no operational implications. It doesn't tie in what you do every day to your long-term vision. And this is the only process I've seen where the two are connected.
Peter Drucker the father of modern management, says there are two key parts to the strategy equation: knowing the right things to do and then doing those things right. So it's often not the lack of strategy that causes failure, but rather the inability to implement that strategy that causes failure.
If a company has no strategy, or if the strategy isn't able to be articulated, they have one. In Tab's case, it was sell, sell, sell. I guess that can be a strategy. The problem is there's no way to contextualize that strategy. If you don't have anything else other than a strategy that says sell, well, you can sell office products and hamburgers, and it all makes sense.
And probably most dramatic result of the strategic thinking sessions was a total agreement on the direction and focus for the organization, with the team 100% behind that direction. And we began to grow. I think you might recall, we grew 30%, over 30% for a number of years, because, and when the competitors were growing 5 to 10%. So we felt real good about where we're going and what what we did. And that was really as a result of getting together with you and the organization and following up with the strategic thinking process. Definitely.
And then as we went through the process, it finally became clear to us that we were successful every time we had a good product. And that allowed us to bring the whole team together, and going forward we could then use that common denominator or common consensus as a way to run our business.
We at Strategy Partners have a rather unique way of helping you get to your driving force, or what we call your strategic heartbeat. That's the one element of your business, more than any other, that is at the heart and soul of the organization. It gives you your look and feel over time. And the driving force debate acts as a very powerful dialoguing methodology to help you and your management team determine your future strategic filter. Using that strategic filter, everyone in the organization from top to bottom can determine whether their day-to-day activities are aligned with the chosen future direction. As you'll hear from my CEO guests, while the strategic driver concept is simple in nature, identifying it is not always easy, and often it turns out to be something different than what they expected.
In the end, I think what I found to be most beneficial was the concept of driving force, because not only the driving force gave us some sense of what we had to focus on and what really drove the business for us, what made us successful, but it also told us then what one or two things we had to excel at. And you go to business school and you learn about, you have to have TQM, you have to have Six Sigma, you have to have best practices, and you have to have good financial controls, you have to have good technology. But as a small company, how do you make those trade-offs? What do you really try to focus on? What do you really try to excel at? And what became clear to us through that process was that for us to be successful, we could be a little bit sloppy in manufacturing. Our financial controls didn't have to be exact to the penny at the end of each month. We could take 32 days instead of 31 days. But what really made the difference for our business was product development. So R&D for us was a very, very key area to focus on. And so that was one aspect of the process that helped us narrow our efforts or narrow our focus into the areas that really made the difference.
The product base was something that I thought for sure that was the background of the business. And when we got into it and discussed some alternatives, I think we looked at the product and we looked at the market and we looked at technology as three potential drivers for our business, and concluded that the most likely, it seemed, the best definition of our strategic heartbeat was the marketplace. That really changed our perspective going forward as to what should we be doing and for whom.
As we talked about what the drivers were in the business, it became painfully obvious to everybody in the room that being a product-oriented company was not of value to us, because being product-oriented by definition meant we had to go against Boise Cascade, we had to go against Steelcase, we had to go against competitors that were not 1 or 2 or 3 times our size, but in some cases 10 or 20 times our size for the product lines that we were selling. But when it comes to picking the one driving force in the business, no, I don't think that's intuitive. In fact, our management team individually came to a conclusion that was totally different than we were actually engaged in. We were, in fact, product driven. But our conclusion was that the only place for us to be was in the technology and know-how business. It was the only thing that would give us the ability to differentiate from our competitors, traditional competitors, and create a space where nobody else really was at the time.
So when you're looking at a potential competitor or a real competitor, I think the essential thing to do is to use this process to try and determine their next step and then to beat them to that step, if that's in your plan.
Well, the other thing which was interesting was that as we went through the process, we tried to identify who our real competitors will be and what their strategies might be or what actions they might take over the years. And it's amazing when we go back and look at those 6-year-old plans that about 85 to 90% of what we said came out to be true. So the fact that you go through that process and ask all those questions on what actions the different competitors will take helps you define, if you want to call it, the managing the competitor in some ways. Helps you identify that several years in advance, and you don't have to react when the competitor takes a certain action.
The strategic filter is the tool which you create through the strategic thinking process. You then can use this tool to guide you and your management team in the critical decisions required to successfully execute your strategy.
It's a great tool. We used it a couple of times when we acquired a product line. We didn't buy it, but the corporation bought a product line. They said, "Do you want this?" Well, we put it to the test, to the filter test, and no, we didn't want that product line because it would detract from where we're going. It's one of those areas where we do less of instead of do more of, so we didn't do it.
About 2 years ago, a small team of our marketing and engineering people came up with a wonderful idea, which was an extension of our technology, not our products. And because we were now part of a much bigger company, a lot of people felt that we could afford to do that we should take on this project. And the only way we'll agree to that is to form another company, which was completely separate, and they could take our technology and start a new business for a new product. But we were not going to mix our basic strategy of a product-driven company and a technology-driven company. And I don't think we could have done that before. We would have just taken the other opportunity, gotten defocused, and then somebody else, a competitor who was really focused on just our fundamental business, would have had an advantage because we would have become defocused.
And the filter will tell you whether or not something has changed enough to put your current strategy in jeopardy.
Rack, over the years, I've spoken with a number of M&A, mergers and acquisition people, and they don't seem to really want to talk much about strategic thinking. Why is that?
That's interesting. Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think, it may well be that they're really not concerned about the success or the lack of success of an acquisition, and all they care about is a fee. And if they can explain the deal in financial terms, it's a lot easier to explain than to try and convince a CEO that there's also a good fit strategically between the two businesses. And so it's the financial mindset of an M&A team as opposed to a strategic mindset of an M&A team.
But I just think it's a very handy, disciplined approach to business. And you can use it in acquisitions, alliances for your own company. It works well.
Each of my guests is a successful CEO and has a demonstrated ability of leading teams and understanding the difference between strategy, goals, and actions. Why then did they choose to call strategy partners instead of doing it themselves in-house?
It's very hard to run a process like this by using one of your own people. You have to have somebody who's from the outside, who is truly neutral, doesn't bring any biases, doesn't really pretend to even know your business. But they do bring the process, they do bring the experience from lots of other companies, lots of other organizations, and that's where the real value is.
It's important that every senior management team engage in a process like this. And as I said early on, I don't think you can do it in-house with your own people, because there are too many axes to grind. There are too many decisions that people want to defend or hold on to. And a process that is as significant as this, managed by a facilitator who understands business processes but does not see it as important to give you a solution, but help you to your own solution, I think that's absolutely critical.
No, I think we had looked at the more traditional approaches, the Boston Consulting Group, or the work being done at MIT and so on. So when we met with you folks, we felt that the approach that you took in developing the strategy made a lot more sense for our business and our company than some of the other approaches.
What happens is we started at the top level with strategic thinking, then we wrote the plan, then we got our more tactical objectives, then we translated that into performance objectives, and then we measured those objectives in each department and for each person. And we had each person's role, even down to the person on the manufacturing line. What will they do to support their objective, that their division or their operations had? So it was very, very successful for us, very successful.
Your business, your firm basically brings truly a partner who keeps the process going in a very rational, objective, organized way.
With the process, there's no way to skip things. I mean, especially with the way you facilitate, Rudy, you're going to make sure that the process is followed and everything gets accomplished and everything gets considered.
The solutions to the future success of your business are stored in the heads of your management team, and our structured thinking process is the key to unlock them.
I think the number one thing that we saw right off the bat was that in your approach, you were providing the process, and the people who know the business, which was my management team, were the ones who were developing the strategy. In a lot of the other companies, we saw that they came in as the experts, as if they knew our business and knew our competition, knew our marketplace, and were going to define the strategy for us. And the biggest difference between the two approaches was that in this case, with your process, with your help, we could bring all of our knowledge, all of our expertise, all of our understanding of our business, markets, competition, and develop our strategy. That was the main difference.